Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. Today's video is going to be absolutely bonkers. Now, the data is in, and the FDIC has just recently taken over the second failed bank of 2024, and there are massive rumors of potential wrongdoing. And I have here to discuss this story, obviously, Jack with Nobody Special Finance on YouTube. He has done so much investigation onto what's happening outside of the headlines, and I have the man on a mission, our co-host, Mitch Vexler, here to get under the hood and try to figure out what exactly is going on with this bank in the town. Does it have anything to do with bonds? Does it have anything to do with the school district? Well, we're going to find that out today. Jack, Mitch, how are y'all today? And happy Monday.
I'm doing great, Travis. Thanks for having me on.
Always nice to see you, brother. Mitch, how you doing, sir?
Okay, it's not so happy for some people in this community we're about to discuss, and there's a lot of problems, but as we're about to find out, it's not just this community.
So I'm going to let Jack take this away. And don't forget, again, show this man some love. Go to his channel, like the video, do all of that type of stuff. Jack, the microphone is yours.
I woke up Saturday morning. I had a message from my moderator, Mish, who helps me out on my channel, with a link to this. Another bank had failed. This is a small bank in the sleepy little town of Lindsay, Oklahoma, that failed. So I went down this rabbit hole over the weekend. I did a lot of digging into this bank and the people involved and the town. And although this might be a small story about a small town and a relatively small amount of money, especially considered some of the big Silicon Valley banks that failed last year, I do think this is an important story because this shows that greed and corruption comes in all shapes and sizes. And the more I dug down into this, I find a town that appears to be plagued by corruption and theft. And it has now gotten to such a big proportion that now it's making national news. And it's my hope that coming out of this story, maybe we get to the bottom of what's going on in this town, and these innocent people in the town of Lindsay stop being victimized, because it really looks like corruption and theft has been bleeding this town dry for some time now. So first, let's start with the national news and what they are telling us in the press, and then we'll go to what is not being said. All right, so here's the FDIC release. Bank failures happen on Friday. They like to break the news after the market closes so that it gets minimal coverage and everybody started their weekend. First Bank and Trust of Duncan, Oklahoma acquires the insured deposits of First National Bank of Lindsay, Oklahoma. All right, so some interesting things there. First of all, First National Bank of Lindsay, that's the one that failed. It is now being acquired by First Bank and Trust of nearby Duncan. But an important word here is insured deposits of First National Bank, because this is slightly different than all the bank failures we saw last year and even the other bank failure that we saw this year. So the First National Bank of Lindsay, Oklahoma was closed today by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, who then appointed the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the FDIC, as the receiver. To protect the depositors, the FDIC entered into a purchase and assumption agreement with First Bank and Trust, yada, yada. So the short end of this, guys, is if you are a small customer at this bank, no change to your money is still there. If you are within the insured limit under $250,000, you woke up this morning, you are now a customer of the First Bank and Trust of Duncan, whereas you used to be a customer of First National Bank of Lindsay. There is no change for you. You are unaffected by this. So, right away, the most important thing is there's really no impact on any of the ordinary people in this town. All right, but then the story goes on and it gets a little bit more interesting here. Based on the estimated recoveries of the failed bank's assets, the FDIC will make 50% of uninsured funds available to those depositors on Monday, October 21st of 2024. This amount could increase as the FDIC sells the assets of the failed bank. So this is where this story is very different from some of the other stories. Right? The uninsured depositors are only getting back 50 cents on the dollar. All the banks that failed last year, Signature Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic Bank, even that little tiny bank in Kansas that failed because of the CEO's embezzlement and the pig butchering scam, all of the uninsured depositors at that bank got back everything. At this bank, the uninsured depositors are only getting back 50 cents on the dollar. So this is a different outcome here, and it's significant. because when the FDIC had bailed out all of the uninsured depositors at all of those other banks, even the small ones that failed previously, they were de facto guaranteeing all deposits across the country by declaring these tiny little banks too big to fail, using the systemic risk exception in order to bail out the uninsured depositors. They're only doing that for half of the uninsured deposits at this bank. So this bank in sleepy little Oklahoma, people are losing money. Now, it's not that much money is being lost here, because as of June 30th, First National Bank of Lindsay reported total assets of $107.8 million, total deposits of $97.5 million. Approximately $7.1 million of deposits exceeded the FDIC insurance limit. That amount is likely to change once the FDIC obtains additional information. So it looks like only $3.5 million is being lost by bank customers here. They're saying there's 7.1 million of uninsured deposits, and they're going to get back 50 cents on the dollar. So $3.5 million goes up in smoke here. I don't know who is losing that $3.5 million. We don't know that detail, but that is different. People are losing money here. And the other important thing, guys, is this is a small bank, $107.8 million. This is not a big behemoth bank. This is not a continuation of the crisis from last year. There is some, I'll say, lazy reporting going on about this story, where a lot of people are trying to connect this bank failure to the story of last spring and last March with Silicon Valley. This is a totally different animal. And if people read beyond the headlines, they would get that information, because you can see right here, the FDIC preliminarily estimates that the failure will cost its deposit insurance fund about $43 million. The estimate will change over time as the assets are sold. So right away, you know something's up here, because they lost $43 million at a $107 million bank. That's not losses from U.S. Treasuries or a couple of loans that went bad. Almost half the money at this bank went missing. Actually, if you count the $10 million in capital and the $3.5 million of money that's going to be lost due to uninsured depositors, it's actually closer to $60 million went missing at this bank here. So somebody stole here is what's going on. In the next sentence, they confirm that alleged fraud caused the failure of the bank and the cost to the deposit insurance fund. All right. So as we go on in this story and we read on, I want you to keep in mind, alleged fraud, nothing has been proven right now. The wheels of justice turn very slow. So it's important to keep that in mind. But the deposit insurance fund, you, the customer of any bank in the United States, you are bearing the cost of this alleged fraud, because the deposit insurance fund is made up of fees charged by member banks, i.e., fees that are passed on to you, the customer. So you pay for this in the form of lower interest rates on your savings or ATM fees. All the little fees the banks charge you goes into the deposit insurance fund. All right. So this loss is being socialized across the whole country with the implicit guarantee of the U.S. taxpayers, who make up the difference to the deposit insurance fund if it ever runs short. All right. So we know some fraud happened at this bank, or at least we suspect some fraud. The size of the losses kind of confirms that, in my opinion. So here's the bank in question. This is the First Bank of Lindsay. Nice building. I was looking around on Google Maps at the actual building. You know, this is kind of what you picture when you see a town of just 2,800 people as of the 2010 census. I suspect the town has probably shrunk since 2010, because as I did my investigation, I found a lot of stories of people who are fed up with this town, who are saying they're leaving and they're getting out because of widespread corruption. And you'd be amazed what you can learn on Facebook, and the ever so, I'll say, prevalent Facebook Karens can be a very powerful source, Travis. And so I pulled on that thread over the weekend. I spoke to some residents in this town online. And let me just tell you what first clued me in that something was really wrong here, that there was more to this story than we're hearing. So, you know, the FDIC confirmed big losses, alleged fraud. So I went to the Facebook page of First National Bank of Lindsay, the bank that failed, and I found this post from September 29th that clued me in that something was up at this bank. And basically what this is saying is First National Bank is devastated by the unexpected loss of a man named Clint Simonton. thoughts and prayers are with the family, and that the bank would be closed so that members of the bank can attend his wake. So we know based on September 29th, this posting at the bank, that someone at the bank had died recently. And also, guys, keep in mind, when the FDIC takes over a bank, that means they've already been looking at the bank for several weeks. So we've got a death at this bank in very close proximity to this story breaking. And here is the man in question. His name is Clint LeClaire Simonton. He died on September 27th, 2024. Turned out he was the vice president of the bank. He was the number 3 man at the bank. And there was some wording about the unexpected loss of Clint Simonton. And then there was some suspicious wording in his obituary that made it seem like the death was a suicide. And I've been able to confirm that with conversations with several local residents. Clint LeClaire Simonton, the number 3 man, the vice president at this bank, committed suicide on September 27th. All right, so he was the number 3 man at the bank. The number 2 man at the bank was this guy, Danny Seibel. And based on my conversations with the residents in Lindsay, Danny Seibel, we know he was the CEO and the president of the bank. And unconfirmed at this point, but I have had several local residents tell me that Danny Seibel was fired from this bank several days before Clint Simonton's suicide. All right, so I want to just take a pause here for a minute, guys, and remind everybody that there is alleged fraud, emphasis alleged. Nobody has been arrested. Nobody has been charged, and that some of these are unconfirmed rumors here. But we do know for a fact that this man died, and we've got confirmation it was a suicide, and the rumor mill saying that this man was fired several days before, the number 2 man at the bank. And then the final player here that we're going to mention, the number 3 man at the bank, is this guy, the number 1 man at the bank. He is the bank's owner. This guy's name is Jack Justice. I kid you not, Jack Justice. I couldn't help but giggle when I heard the name. You know, kind of like the name you'd think from like a 1980s cop drama or something.
Or your name.
Yeah. He was a cop and good at his job. But no, that Jack Justice, he's the owner. So on the surface, it looks like Jack Justice is the victim here. I want to emphasize on the surface because he was the owner of the bank. He had $10 million in capital. The difference between the bank's assets and liabilities was about $10 million. So on the surface, it looks like Jack Justice lost $10 million when somebody stole tens of millions of dollars from his bank. That is assuming he had nothing to do with it and he didn't know anything about it. Until we know where the money went, we won't know. All right. So that's the story of the bank. I guess I'll stop here if you guys have any questions or you want to talk a little bit about the story of the bank. Yeah.
I want to go to get Mitch's reaction, and I also want to tell the viewers that this story gets a lot more suspicious and a lot more worse. But like Jack is pointing out, everything is all allegations. We're not accusing anyone of anything. But when we start looking at the bonds in the school district, it's just mind blowing. But I just want to say this, and we'll move on to Mitch's reaction. First of all, they bail out. I want to make the point. They bailed out Silicon Valley Bank. Oh, I believe I've heard reports that Gavin Newsom had money in there, Oprah, Roku. So they bail out all these elite people, but in that small town over in Oklahoma, they don't. That doesn't seem fair because it was a lot more with Silicon Valley. Now, the other thing is like, you know, when you think about $40 million missing, I'm asking myself, like, where did the money go? How do you spend? And why do you need $40 million? How do you spend that in a small town? And why would you want it? I mean, this is crazy, but let's move. Mitch, can we get your reactions on the story so far?
Well, you've heard of too big to fail. This is too small to care. That's the reality of the FDIC. It's the exact inverse of why they're doing what they're doing. And it's the same problem that you're seeing in North Carolina, too small to care. All talk, no action. This should never have happened, right? So you've got so many systemic failures right from the auditors, because the auditors will say, well, we only audited what we were given. Well, that means you didn't perform an audit. The idea that we're at this point, this many years, because this doesn't happen overnight. This is a multi-year scheme. Whatever the scheme is, it's a scheme. So the auditors failed. The local community failed in terms of go and look at the school bonds, see how this money was related back to the school bonds. So you've got to look at those bonds. You've got to look at the notes from inside of the bank. Takes multiple entities working in tandem to bring everything to the surface. Then, of course, you may get the FDIC that says, yeah, well, we really don't care about that, nor do we want to look at that, which is why all these documents have got to come up. Every single mortgage, every single note, anything that finance having anything to do with a bond has got to come to the surface, and then you'll get the truth. So you get there either under the Freedom of Information Act or you get there under court subpoenas. Either way, this has to happen.
And Mitch, we'll get there. We haven't even showed the viewers that. I feel like you gave them the ending of the video already. I'm just kidding.
Travis, can I just weigh in on something Mitch said there? And it was a very powerful statement. Too small to care.
Yeah, that was so good.
And Mitch, you perfectly summarized this story and what the people in this town have been living through, because I spent the weekend digging through local community Facebook posts about people who are struggling and how the appearance of theft. I got to be careful here because nothing is confirmed here. It's all allegations. But you can see these people struggling and how the money has just been sapped from the people of this town. Only 2,800 people in this town. People saying, I give up, I'm leaving, I can't get ahead. Their bills are going up left and right, and things just keep getting worse in the town. And there is this hush that is coming over the town as people who I think have a lot of skin in the game here, people who are maybe afraid of having their assets clawed back once we find out what's been going on in this town, are threatening people, threatening with social retaliations or financial or even legal retaliations, anybody who even talks about this story within the town. And sorry, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So we are going to shine a big, bright light on this. And to the people in this town, if you suspect you know what's going on, by all means, reach out to me, email Travis or Mitch, because I think these thieves are flying below the radar because of what Mitch said, too small to care. And they've been able to get away with it. And the people of this town are paying the price for that. And on top of that, along the lines of too small to care, there was a very potent clip a few months ago, or about a year ago now. They were doing hearings in the U.S. Senate, and Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma asked Janet Yellen about why she would bail out Silicon Valley Bank. Why would she bail out the uninsured depositors who don't have the FDIC protections? And would she extend the same guarantees to a small rural bank in his state of Oklahoma? Well, we got our answer, didn't we? No, they wouldn't. Too small to care. This little bank. Why do venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, Oprah, even Chinese investors, they get their uninsured deposits covered, but not the people who lost money at this sleepy little town in Oklahoma? And James Lankford called this over a year ago. And here it is, a bank in Oklahoma not getting bailed out. And I'm not advocating for a bailout, but it seems like the government is being very arbitrary in choosing who gets a bailout and who doesn't. That is not how capitalism is supposed to work. I want to now talk about what's been going on in this town. All right. And this is what I found over the weekend. And, I spoke with several local residents. I'm not going to share any names or anything, but I can tell you it is not a secret that there is corruption in this little town. And up until this point, it's just been, to quote Mitch again, too small to care. All right. So this story I found in the Garvin County News, City of Lindsay facing bleak financial outlook. This was in June of 2022, June 2nd. Lindsay city officials are facing some hard financial decisions involving cutbacks, spending freezes, and potential layoffs after receiving news last week that the city's two main operating accounts may be nearly depleted. Accountant Frank Crawford of Crawford & Associates told Lindsay City Council members during a special budget workshop on May 25th that the city's bank accounts have not been reconciled in more than 18 months, and carryover amounts used to plan budgets for the last 2 years were inflated and inaccurate. Guys, what happened is the city manager, who is now the mayor in this town, I don't know if fired is the right word, but they gave the accountants, the auditors, the boot in 2020. Stop auditing the city's books. And by 2022, there was a $1.1 million hole in the city's finances. All right. This is the same town where somebody apparently, allegedly, just stole $60 million from the local bank. Are we seeing a pattern here now? This happened in 2020, A year later, or 2 years later, we get this story now. And this is how the average person pays the bill, right? There's a lot of people, and I was reading this in some of these Facebook groups. People are saying, oh, you know, your money is still in the bank. You didn't lose anything. Don't make a big fuss about this. Don't spread rumors. All right. And it's prominent members or members of several prominent families in this town that I notice are driving the hush hush, like don't talk about it, as in people who I think probably have a lot to lose if it turns out that tens of millions of dollars was stolen and those assets get clawed back. Lindsay raises utility rates and fires city managers. This was in June 30th of 2022, a few days after that other article. The city of Lindsay is raising utility rates to bridge the projected $1.1 million budget deficit that the city is facing. The Lindsay City Council approved the rate increases on city-provided electric and water utilities during a special meeting on June 22nd. So here you can see that $1.1 million budget gap that magically opened up a year and a half after they fired the city auditor, and that loss is being socialized among the citizens of Lindsay in the form of their electric and their utility bills. All right, now there's all kinds of language in here saying, oh, it's going to be a $6 charge, $6.50 charge for your base electric bill, and oh, 7 to 10 cents for water bills. That's what they sold the town. And then you go into these Facebook groups and people are posting pictures, and there are local TV station interviews of people's bills tripling overnight because of what happened. Now, you also had things like natural gas got more expensive in 2022 after the invasion of Ukraine. So you did have inflation going on under the surface, but a tripling of utility bills? No way. That is whatever was going on in this town, and it appears that there was something very nefarious going on in this town. The cost of it is being spread out across the utility payers. The average person in town is paying for it. And whatever happened at this bank, because the $43 million hit to the deposit insurance fund, the cost of that theft is being spread out among the taxpayers. This is how the average person gets nickel and dimed to pay for the wholesale greed and theft of powerful people. It happens on Wall Street, it happens in DC, and it even happens in these sleepy little towns in flyover country. And that's why, again, I'm driving back to that comment that Mitch made, too small to care. People should care because this hurts people. This is a lot of pain. Just because it's a couple of dollars here and there spread out across everybody shouldn't make this less of a story, apparently years ago now. How are we going to audit? Are we going to hire a private auditor to come in and reconcile our books? Or are we going to hire the State Office of Investigations? And the big difference is a private auditor would come in and just basically say, yeah, this, that, or this charge, or you have this shortfall. Whereas the state legal office, if they investigate, they come in and they say, you guys broke the law when you did this, or you haven't been doing this. So one has a criminal connotation to it. I don't know whatever came out of this, but whatever comes out of this, I certainly hope somebody at the state, federal, and local level takes a hard look at what is going on in the town of Lindsay, because you look at these images of people with brown water coming out of their spouts, people complaining about utility bills doubling, even though the power grid is getting less reliable. Somebody needs to look into what is going on in this town, who's benefiting, who stole what, if anything, and then how do we recover those funds, and how do we give these people a break?
Jack and I talked yesterday. Jack was going down this rabbit hole, and he got me to go down it with him inadvertently. I was like, dude, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole with you. I got this other thing I got to do. But I did anyways because he mentioned the school district. Here's an article on August 29th that's saying voters passed school bond issues in Lindsay and Windward, and essentially they passed $28.54 million in bond debt. They had voter approval of 66.39%. But going back to what Jack was saying, this is also what I found interesting. I actually found that audit report. At least this is an audit from 2022. The school district, you guys see that right here. Let me scroll to the top. Real quick. Okay, so this is June 30th of 2022. Now, one of the things that I find interesting about this report is, and again, I'm just saying this is interesting, is the bank VP that Jack has been talking about this entire time is a member of the school board and actually has access to all of the, at least awareness of all of the money that they're spending. That blew me away. they did issue bonds in 2022, 2019, and 2021. I went back to 2021. The VP is on the school board in 2021 as well. I did not go back to 2019. But my point is, you know, they may want to look into this. They, according to this report, the amount of debt that they have, bond debt, and you guys, I'm going to tell you right now, and Mitch could knock this out as well if he wants to, they probably have a lot more bond debt than that. But they're saying $6.1 million in bond debt, multiple bonds issued here. And this is building bonds. So if it's me, I'm wondering, the construction companies, I'm wondering where this bond debt is going. And I'm wondering if that bank, the Bank of Lindsay, had any involvement at all with any type of municipality lending. Mitch, my question is for you. Based on what I just showed you, we got to be careful what we say here, but are you suspicious of wrongdoing?
Yes, extraordinarily. Why? Because since we started this, what we are seeing, when I say this, obviously the videos that we've been putting together for the last 50 days or so, what we are seeing is pattern and practice. And the pattern and practice is rip off mom and pop because they depend on the apathy of mom and pop not to get involved. So we have a school district that we did 10 days ago in North Oklahoma, bankrupt. We have a school district in South Texas involved in 313 agreements, which clearly at this moment looks like a criminal conspiracy to defraud in and of itself, just based on the size of the school district. Then we have Godly, Texas, with a stadium that rivals the SMU stadium with a population of 2,500 people. There's problems everywhere. So the pattern and practice is, well, we just want you to go along to get along. Well, clearly that doesn't work, and that is the definition of apathy, and apathy costs big money. So these communities are in fact bankrupt. At the tail end of the day, that is what is going to be seen out of this. The school districts are bankrupt. The municipalities are bankrupt. They're in it because you've got cross-reference and cross-collateralized loans. And somebody says, well, it's only going up 7 cents per kilowatt hour or whatever it happens to be, and the bill triples. That's nothing. Here's the truth. Now take that money and lever it up 20 to 1. That's where the damages are. Well, we got to go and get another mortgage to cover this up. Well, okay, and that's the definition of a Ponzi scheme. So all of these people that are involved in this, in truth, belong in jail. It should never have gotten to this point. It has festered to the point where, coincidentally, the compound cumulative effect of the real estate tax that we just did on the prior video is the exact proof of what it is we're talking about here. Here's further proof, and further proof that it affects these smaller communities. But make no mistake, every community is in this up to their eyeballs. So it's the leverage that's doing the damage on the back of what the criminals created in the first place. There's no good solution to this other than the bankruptcy of these municipalities and these school districts and start over. And yes, people need to go to jail. You can't sweep this under the carpet.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very tragic situation. But Jack, what would, you know, when I sent this to you, because obviously when we're on the phone, I immediately, okay, bonds, right? I'm hanging out with Mitch, right? Bonds, school district, right? What was your impression when I sent you that audit and it had his name on there? How did you feel about that?
So this is, again, you have to be careful because you have a grieving family involved. You have innocent people through dotted lines are involved. And we have a situation that is just developing. Everything is alleged, right? So we have very little information here. But at the same time, you can't let that stop you from digging into whatever is going on in the town, because there is a lot of smoke here. Something really stinks in this town. And I can see the effort within these social media groups to use the family grief and the fact that we don't know, it's all alleged, to stifle any talk about this subject, to bury it, to go along and get along. And, we see a lot of times you need to keep the money moving to keep the grift happening. You need to keep the projects flowing. And a lot of times schools are used to do this. And you yank on people's emotional strings, you hide behind the kids. And, anybody who's opposed to borrowing millions of dollars to build a football stadium doesn't care about the kids, or, what does it say about us if we don't invest in our children? But that's not really what's happening all the time. A lot of times it's really just using the kids as cover to steal. And considering the fact that $1.1 million went missing from the town budget after they let their auditor go, and now tens of millions appears to have been stolen from the local bank, every major transaction in this town needs to be looked at closely and with a high degree of suspicion. And the fact that you've got overlapping board members, the VP of this bank who just committed suicide is also a past member of the school board, a past member of the hospital board. This needs to be looked at. This needs to be looked at very closely, all right, with a fine-tooth comb. And you can't let people use a grieving family as a shield to fly cover for theft. There are too many victims here. This kind of thing happens in too many towns across the country. And maybe, just maybe, if you break up this crime, if enough attention happens in the town of Lindsay on whatever happened here, maybe the town next door or the town 3 counties over, they think twice before they do it the next time.
I struggled with that. And I want to say, in the off chance that any of his family member watches this video, I just want to say this, if you're any of the family members, just remember the best. Remember the best in him and hold on to that. Things are real hard right now, and he wasn't himself. And just remember the best in him. And I just wanted to say that. Now, I have a couple questions, one question particularly that I want to ask you both. But before I do that, let me show the viewers real quick this list of banks from the FDIC. This is the October 2024 list of banks examined for CRA compliance. And we got a few kind of smaller banks right here. You see that, but we have a total of 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do you appreciate? Not FEMA, but we have about 10 banks on there. And I got a little smile from Jack, pretty much embarrassed myself. But, I just want to ask both you guys this question. A lot of stuff going on in the economy, a lot of stuff going on with banks, bonds, maximum capacity, consumers broke. Starting with you, Mitch, do you see, I already know what your answer is going to be, so I'm laughing, but do you see in the future more bank failures, whether it's fraud or not? And it may be all fraud. It all is fraud at the end of the day. But do you see more bank failures happening in the future, and why or why not?
Yes, I see more banks happening within the next half second. So on that list was 55 banks, not 10. And the story is there's about 700 that are in harm's way of being closed down, which in truth, they should be. So yeah, the problems are very substantial. But before we even go down that rabbit trail, you've got multiple problems here. So to the district attorneys, police officers, detectives, and the citizens of these small communities, you can no longer sit back, as we've been saying, and not get involved. And like Jack said, the sunshine is the ultimate disinfectant. So to those people that I just mentioned, if you have construction contracts that are paid for by a bank and funded by a bank, and that goes to a school district, there's a high probability based on what we've been looking at a kickback scheme. Somebody's getting paid, and it isn't the fees up front going to the bank. So you have to look at that. With a school district, food contracts, you got construction contracts, food contracts. Healthcare facilities, well, construction contracts, healthcare facility on a mortgage. Is it a conflict of interest? There's all sorts of things that have to be looked at and considered. You can't sit back and do nothing. And this is the same problem of what's going on in these other communities that I mentioned before. The fraud is rampant. And the theory was that the people who are leading the community, well, they wouldn't do anything like that. Well, yeah, they would, and yeah, they are. And we've seen mountains of proof of this. And even in the document we just released a few minutes ago, it shows you even at the federal level, there's also all these problems. It's just magnified. But the idea that a small community can't be touched by this, Jack just blew that out of the water.
Mitch, you just mentioned the hospital and the medical contracts. Again, I got a preamble with the asterisk of only allegations here, nothing proven, no evidence of. So we're only talking about, circumstantial things here. But the owner of this bank, Jack Justice, again, there's that name. He was a cop and good at his job. Jack Justice owns a pharmacy and a nursing home in a nearby town of Pauls Valley. And he was heavily involved in an effort to save the Pauls Valley Medical Center, a local hospital that went bankrupt a few years before this story broke. And it was bought out by private organizations, and bonds were issued to try to save, and local sales tax was issued. I mean, this guy was all over that stuff. Now the fact that his bank, tens of millions of dollars, has gone missing, that warrants looking into as well. Again, not alleging anything improper may or may not have happened there, but these individuals that are involved in this bank and all of this money going missing in this town, everything they have touched is now fair game and needs to be looked into, because a lot of money is going missing. And now you've got a town with no hospital. You've got people whose utility bills are going up. People's taxes are going up. Their water sucks. You know, this is how suffering just festers and how small town America gets victimized. And so it needs to be looked at.
Isn't it amazing that, without really knowing what research you've done, it took me less, and hopefully you were impressed by that. I was trying to impress you, but it took me less than 5 minutes to find that audited report. Isn't it funny how if you just start with bonds in the ISD, it's fascinating to me how it appears that there is so many challenges, so many problems starting from there. It's like it's ground zero. That's why me and Mitch, especially Mitch, has been beating the drum. I mean, case in point, we were going to talk about a bank failure. We ended up going into the ISD talking about bonds. That's insane. Now, closing words. Let me give you each an opportunity, if you guys can, close this out, starting with you, Mitch Vexler. How would you like to close this out, sir?
The laws exist for a reason. Unfortunately, the opposite of the law is the apathy. And where I'm going with this, look at the amount of conflicts of interest that have occurred at this bank. Never mind that a person did damage to themselves, whatever that situation was. But those conflicts of interest under law should never have been happened, and or should have been disclosed to allow that to happen where the light is being shined on them. There's no light shining on any of this. All of this is connected. And that same situation is occurring when you've got multiple people. We have that in Denton Central Appraisal District. You have people on the board that shouldn't be there. You have an attorney at the Denton Central Appraisal District. He is an officer of the court knowing full well that laws are being broken. That means he has full knowledge. I don't know if he's under investigation, but nonetheless, this is happening. So when you have these people that claim to be leaders in a community that turn out not to be leaders, that is because the light hasn't been shined on them. They are breaking the law. They are breaking mom and pop's back, economic back. They are breaking the economic back of the engine. And all of these things, regardless of the community, as we keep saying, they're all hooked at the hip. Fraud is fraud. It touches every single facet of our lives. Doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, you're being defrauded. And the evidence just keeps mounting and mounting. And what Jack has here is another story, just like what is happening in Godley or what is happening in the Itasca School District. It's happening everywhere. Pattern and practice. And the pattern and practice has to be destroyed. Put people in jail, send the message loud and clear, and this nonsense will stop.
Jack, that's a tough act to follow, sir, but last words from you.
Travis, you're right. You did impress me with the school bond issue that you brought up, and realizing that Clint Simonton was the board member involved, at least who his name was attached to that audit. I found this stuff in a couple of hours of research on the weekend about the town, and you found that stuff about the school bonds in a couple of minutes. So what does that tell you? If, pardon the phrase, Travis, if a couple of nobodies on YouTube are able to dig this stuff up with some cursory research without even leaving their homes, that means nobody's even looking. That means nobody is even trying to find out what's going on here. All right. Why is a guy in his home office in Pennsylvania and another guy in Texas? Why are they the ones digging into this and not local officials, not the taxpayers in this town, not the state officials? Are people looking the other way? Why are they looking the other way? Are they negligent? Are they paid off? These are not victimless crimes. Go to these Facebook pages and look at the people complaining that their power's out and grandma's on oxygen, or their water is brown, they can't take a shower, or a load of whites just got ruined because mud is coming out of the tap in this town that just tripled the water bills. All right. This is not a victimless crime. Everybody in this town is a victim. And if you're living with the cost of inflation, guess what? The Deposit Insurance Fund took the $43 million hit. That is paid for by you, the average person anywhere in this country watching this video. These are not victimless crimes. This is why our cost of living keeps going up. It's because of crooks who are stealing. We need to look into this stuff. This needs to be dug into. And that comment by Mitch, too small to care, was really powerful. I hope that is not the case here. I really do, for the sake of the people in this town who are being bled dry by somebody. We don't know who, but we have a good idea now, a good idea of where to start. Maybe now we can change that.
Well said, gentlemen. Absolutely well said. Happy Monday to the both of you. I'm going to get him out of here. You guys, if you like what Jack had to say, don't forget he has a great, fantastic actually, YouTube channel named Nobody Special Finance. He does lives Monday through Friday, covers the entire market in like 10 stories. I'm like, Jack, you're doing too much. You're giving too much value. At 9 a.m. Eastern. And if you guys are out there investing in real estate or just living your life, you guys already know, we wish you luck and we hope you win.